This is News 24 Live. We're back with Daniel Silk looking at the political ramifications of the Constitutional Court judgment. Daniel, you alluded to what Zwelinzima Vavi has said and his role in response to the judgment today. Where do you think that's going in terms of his sort of role in politics in South Africa?
I think Mr. Vavi has been waiting for an opportunity to try and re-enter the political mainstream in the country. He has been on the sidelines. He's largely been someone who has operated on Twitter and has not been in the public eye until really this week. Until, in fact, over the course of the last 24 hours, when his statements have become very pointed, and it does look as though he is keen to re-enter the fray, certainly in terms of a populist movement against, whether it's against the ANC or whether it's against the state capture issue or President Zuma or a combination of the above. So I think he's been waiting in the wings for an opportunity. The question is, has he got the ability still? Does he have the gravitas to organize? I think Mr. Vavi is a highly talented individual who can articulate extremely well. But of course, he has had a chance over the course of the last few years to get a workers' front together. This hasn't really gained any substantial traction in South African politics, even though there were promises of it. And I think he's got his work cut out for him. However, I think the interesting issue here is to see whether we do have some sort of populist movement to unseat President Zuma, if it can be in conjunction with Vavi and, for that matter, the EFF, who look as though they're on the same bandwagon on this particular issue. It could be interesting in our politics. It also could be dangerous to our state to have some sort of quasi-revolutionary movement taken to the streets in protest against our president. But then it's happening today in Brazil. Issues around impeachment, thousands of people out on the streets in Brazil are happening within the ambit of the Constitution in an orderly fashion. So it's interesting that South Africa, in a sense, following similar patterns to that happening in our BRICS partners, Brazil.
Yeah, and there are many parallels with South Africa and Brazil in terms of the economy, the social structure, things like the favelas, very similar to our informal settlements. And if they do have a civic movement that is quite orderly, that's an interesting sort of case study that might provide a counterpoint to what happens here. Again, what you said there about Vavi and the economic freedom fighters, do you think Vavi is likely to really kind of move in with the EFF or to try and start up something new that has real political legs?
Well, I think since Vavi was expelled from COSATU, I think the view had been that he would have wanted to have established an independent body away from the EFF. He would not want to be necessarily politically tainted by an association with Mr. Malema. And I think, in a sense, Vavi's ideology, a more workerist or left-wing ideology, would be relatively different to that espoused by Mr. Malema. So I'm not quite sure that there's ideological synergy on policy issues between Vavi and Malema. The synergy may well be in a broad populist umbrella movement to remove Jacob Zuma if the ANC feels as though they want to stick by him into the next few years. And I think what we haven't seen in South Africa is this kind of broad cross-political party umbrella movements. We saw it in the old days of the UDF at the end of the apartheid state. Different organizations with very different political and ideological messages getting together under one banner, the common goal to end apartheid. Now it looks as though we're moving into an era in which we could very well see that disparate political parties with disparate economic and other philosophies getting together under a populist banner, in a sense, to make sure that Jacob Zuma goes. I think it's early days to pontificate on that, but the suggestions in the last few hours would certainly indicate that different political parties and different players may well be talking to each other over the next few weeks.
And that's something you see. You've spoken about Twitter. That's something you really see if you look at the Economic Freedom Fighters Twitter feed and also the comments Julius Malema made at 12 o'clock after the judgment, that he's involved, he's interested in leading a large group or being involved in leading a large group of the public who are calling for President Jacob Zuma to step down. Just to come back to the ANC, if we look at what's happened today and the response from the ANC, and, you know, you've spoken as well about Vavi, and he's spoken out about his time with President Jacob Zuma in Equatorial Guinea. Are we likely to see more bubbling up of stories linked to problems with President Jacob Zuma's leadership?
Well, I think that the indictment of Zuma in the Constitutional Court judgment does open the door for those who have a bone to pick with Zuma or would like to see a different leader in South Africa. They're going to come out of the closet. And I think we're going to see more of them coming out of the closet. It's easier now, today, to speak against Jacob Zuma or at least to uncover more irregularities that have been happening in the Zuma administration today than it was yesterday or the day before. And on the basis of that, this is an opportunity, certainly, for those with the knives out for President Zuma to, in fact, bring those knives into the public domain. I think they've been hitherto rather reluctant to come out into public, with the exception of Jonas and Feki Mentor. But I think now this might be a catalyst for many more to come forward with issues that have concerned them over the Zuma presidency. And again, the technical side of the judgment was one thing. Those political implications and the changing nature of the power of the Jacob Zuma presidency in South Africa is absolutely another issue. And I think that secondary issue is going to be the one, I think, that will weaken the president perhaps even more than the allegations and the judgment in technical terms from the Constitutional Court.
If we go back to February, Jeremy Gauntlett for President Jacob Zuma in the Constitutional Court alluding to the political year ahead. And we know that we have municipal elections, not when on the calendar, but on the calendar. What do you think the chances are that there's going to be a delay on the actual time of voting? If, elections might not happen this year at all, what do you think is going on there?
Look, I certainly think that the IEC has to get its house in order, and I'm extremely concerned that the IEC seems to have been tardy, to put it mildly, in compiling proper voters' rolls with proper addresses. This is a blight on our democratic landscape, which has been relatively efficient since 1994. The last thing we want in South Africa is a litigious or contested local government election, especially in more combustible times that we are living in right now. So I would certainly support the rectification as best as we can, the state of the voters' rolls and the potential delay, but not to delay beyond this year. And I think that we are likely to see perhaps some sort of corrective action taken on the part of the IEC, some sort of systems put in place to allow voters to vote and to have their address recorded in some format, not necessarily as per the voters' roll. Perhaps there are other methods in which you could record voters' addresses to ensure free and fair participation in the constituencies in which voters have to vote. But at the same time, I think we need to show the outside world that an election in South Africa cannot be delayed and has to take place this year. We may well see an election after the 3-month window in which we have to hold that election by mid-August. Perhaps it can be postponed by a few months just to make sure everything is in order and that all political parties buy in to the process. And that's what's critical here. The election can only be held once all political parties buy in. Otherwise, we may well get contested elections, court actions, and of course this will again be detrimental and negative for our democracy. Hopefully at some point, whether it's before August or whether it's after August, but with buy-in from all participants, and that's going to be critical.
Certainly, only 3 months into 2016, a slew of very interesting and important political events have taken place. This definitely goes down in the history books as an important moment, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens as the months roll on, and we look forward to the municipal elections whenever they may be. If you'd like to comment on this interview or any of the discussion around Nkandla and the judgment, go to news24.com or join us on Twitter at News24.